AI is not one single product. It behaves differently depending on the model, the language, and even the country you use it from. And that has real consequences for investors in Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, and the entire AI stack. Welcome back to AI Assets. Today, we are talking about why your AI does not act the same in every language, why Anthropic's latest Claude study is a big deal, and why this matters for anyone putting real money into AI. Anthropic just published data from more than 300,000 Claude conversations. They compared different Claude models and different languages and found systematic differences in personality traits like caution, warmth, rigor, and brevity. In plain English, the same AI behaves differently depending on which model version you pick and which language you speak to it in. For example, some models come off as more critical and analytical, others as more friendly and encouraging. And that pattern is not random. It shows up statistically when you look at hundreds of thousands of chats. They also saw that tone shifts across languages. Users in some languages experience Claude as warmer, more polite, and more humorous, while users in other languages get a more reserved or more skeptical style, even when they ask the same type of question. Anthropic is not saying Claude is broken. They are saying that personality is an emergent property of large models, plus training data, plus fine-tuning that can drift in different directions depending on model size, safety tuning, and language distribution. So that is the news. Now let us talk about why this matters for your portfolio. From an investor perspective, this is not cute AI psychology. It is about product consistency, regulatory risk, and competitive moats for companies like Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, and any public company that embeds these models into their workflows. If you are a global bank, a healthcare provider, or a listed SaaS company rolling out AI co-pilots in 20 countries, you cannot afford that your German users get a cautious, non-committal assistant, while your Spanish users get a highly assertive one. That is customer experience risk, legal risk, and brand risk. This also defines a new layer in the AI stack. We talk a lot about chips, models, and apps, but this research highlights another layer: behavior control, governance, and observability. Companies that can standardize AI behavior across languages and models will have real pricing power. Think of this as a compliance and personality wrapper around the core model that enterprises will pay for, because it reduces the risk of inconsistent advice, biased outcomes, and regulatory trouble. Now, what is the market missing? Most headlines treat this as a quirky fun fact. Claude has different personalities. But the real story is that AI vendors are now forced to admit their systems are not deterministic products. They are probabilistic services whose behavior can vary with context in ways that are hard to test fully. That is a problem for every enterprise buyer who thought one model, one behavior. It means due diligence has to go beyond benchmark scores and latency and into questions like, how does this model behave in my specific language mix, my domain, my regulatory environment? It also reveals a less obvious opportunity. If Anthropic can prove that it understands, measures, and corrects for these personality drifts better than competitors, that becomes a differentiator in the enterprise market. Investors tend to look at Anthropic versus OpenAI in terms of raw model quality and partnerships. But this kind of research builds a brand around safety, governance, and steerability, making Claude more attractive for industries where consistency and auditability are more important than raw creativity. There is also a geopolitical angle. Language-linked personality differences can amplify or reduce trust in AI across regions, which ultimately affects adoption curves and revenue potential in non-English markets. A model that feels respectful, nuanced, and reliable in English, but flippant or dismissive in other languages, will undermonetize huge markets. For investors, that means you cannot just assume Model X dominates globally. The local behavior matters. So what happens next? And what should you watch? First, expect more transparency reports like this from Anthropic, OpenAI, and maybe Google. As regulators in the EU, the US, and elsewhere push for AI accountability, vendors will have to publish more data on how their models behave across languages, demographics, and use cases. Second, watch for product announcements around steering tools. Things like consistent personalities, enterprise-grade system prompts, audit logs for responses, and dashboards that measure tone, riskiness, and compliance across languages will become selling points, not side features. Third, pay attention to earnings commentary from big cloud and SaaS vendors. Listen for mentions of governance, control, guardrails, and multi-language behavior in AI product updates. That is a tell that customers are demanding solutions to exactly the problem we are talking about. From a positioning point of view, this trend favors a few buckets of companies. Foundation model providers that lean into safety and steerability, middleware players building monitoring and governance tools, and consultancies or platforms that help enterprises localize and standardize AI behavior at scale. It also adds another risk factor for pure-play wrapper companies that simply call someone else's API. If they cannot guarantee consistent behavior across languages and regions, they will struggle to justify their margins as buyers move upstream to platforms that solve this at the root. The big idea is this: AI is not just an algorithm or a chip story, it is a behavior story, and behavior that varies by language is both a risk and an opportunity. Investors who only track benchmarks and parameter counts are missing a key dimension of product quality. If you care about revenue durability, churn, regulatory exposure, and brand trust, you need to start asking how these systems act in the real world, for real people, in real languages. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure you subscribe to AI Assets for daily insights into where AI value is actually being created and how you can position your portfolio around it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you noticed AI tools behaving differently depending on the language or country you use them in? Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.